Hi everyone. Through much of Fugue No. 4 in C-sharp minor from Book 1 of J.S. Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, the melodic contour of the majority of subject entries is identical. The framing notes are typically the same, with the concluding note approached by a descending 3-2-1 voice-leading strand, and the entire subject structure prolongs the key indicated by the framing notes. Harmonically also, the subject is typically harmonized in a single key, outlining an extended cadential progression. During the exposition, however, because Bach uses a real answer, this answer entry framed by C-sharp minor's dominant note G sharp, despite including the relevant accidentals of the dominant key, is harmonized in the tonic, with the descending strand moving 7 sharp 6 5 in that key. This exposition entry also, despite beginning with the expected G sharp of an answer entry, outlines here instead an entry in F sharp minor, C sharp minor's subdominant, and is essentially harmonized in that key. Typically then, throughout this fugue, subject entries melodically and harmonically prolong the key indicated by their framing notes. There may, however, be some entries where there are changes to the key, the underlying progression, and/or the framing notes may occasionally be rhythmically altered. In this fugue, Bach also uses two countersubjects, which he combines with the subject using triple invertible counterpoint. The first countersubject's melodic contour includes a descending 5-4-3 strand, which may be combined with other subject strands in the same key, such as with the subject's 3-2-1 strand, or may sound different notes of a key, such as with the G sharp minor answer entry discussed earlier, where the notes outline the 3-2-1 strand in G sharp minor, but sound 7 sharp 6 5 in C sharp minor and are harmonized in that key. The second countersubject's melodic contour includes a 1-7-1 strand, which, when combined in the same key with the subject and first countersubject strands, prolongs the key indicated by the subject's and second countersubject's framing notes, but may also sound different notes of a key. The subject and two countersubjects are typically combined using this vertical alignment, in which the two countersubjects enter with the subject's first half note. In this configuration, the invertibility of the strands, when outlining the same key, always produces an extended cadential progression in the key prolonged by the subject's and second countersubject's framing notes. Occasionally, however, subject and countersubject entries may be staggered, such as here, where while these A major subject and countersubject entries are aligned in their typical configuration and are harmonized in that key, the alignment of this D major subject entry is staggered, with its descending notes here therefore sounding 6-5-4 in A major. With the subjects and countersubjects' typical alignment, the melodic contour and rhythm of the central bars are essentially left undisturbed, while the rhythm and melodic contour of the notes in the framing bars are more regularly altered and manipulated. During the fugue, Bach introduces the subject and countersubjects at different times. The subject is initially used on its own until the first countersubject is introduced in bar 35. The first countersubject is then combined with the subject until bar 49, when the second countersubject is introduced. The subject and two countersubjects are then combined until bar 94, where for the remainder of the fugue only the subject and second countersubject are used. Through bars 49 to 94, of the 6 possible vertical combinations of subject and countersubjects, Bach uses only 5, with this combination not included. Bach's omission of this configuration is possibly due to the resulting vertical combination of the outer parts. However, because this is a 5-part fugue, along with the 3 parts involved in the invertible counterpoint, other parts using free counterpoint could mitigate the sounds of these intervals. As mentioned earlier, during this fugue's initial 34 bars, except for this answer entry and this altered subject entry in F sharp minor, Bach essentially treats each subject entry as prolonging the key indicated by the subject's first and final notes. In bar 35, the first countersubject is introduced, here above a C sharp minor subject entry, the key in which they're harmonized. This first counter-subject entry, here outlining the notes in G sharp minor, moves above a subject entry in that key. Both strands, however, are harmonized in C sharp minor, with their notes therefore moving 2-1-7 and 7-sharp-6-5 in that key. Entering here beneath the C sharp minor subject entry, this first counter-subject entry also sounds the relevant notes of that key. Both strands are harmonized in C sharp minor, and the penultimate note of the subject's 3-2-1 descent is here tied into the following bar and moves as a 7-6 suspension over C sharp minor's tonic and submediant chords. The majority of this first counter-subject entry is harmonized in C sharp minor. However, this G sharp minor dominant 7th chord may also be heard as F sharp minor's supertonic 7th, moving to F sharp minor's dominant under the strand's final E sharp note. These F sharp notes also sound as the initial notes of an F sharp minor subject entry. The initial notes of the strand then may be heard as the 5th and 4th degrees of C sharp minor, with the final notes sounding as the 1st and sharp 7th degrees in F sharp minor. Beneath the F sharp minor subject entry, Bach uses the first counter subject and introduces the second counter subject, both of which sound the relevant notes of F sharp minor and are harmonized in that key. All three strands, now in a different configuration, are again used here. Once again, however, although the initial notes of the strands may be heard as the relevant notes in the key of F sharp minor, the lowered 7th degree of the second counter-subject strand, together with the other strands here, may be heard as the dominant chord of A major, the key to which the work moves. As before, here the strand's notes may be heard sounding in two keys, with the initial note sounding the relevant degrees in F sharp minor and the final note sounding in A major. Here Bach uses the staggered D major strand entry discussed earlier. And here first and second counter-subject entries, both harmonized in and sounding the relevant notes of A major, conclude over first inversion F sharp minor harmony, sounding as A major's submediant and C sharp minor's subdominant chords. Here Bach ties the 7th degree of the second counter-subject strand to move as a 7-6 suspension over F sharp minor harmony. The final degree of the first counter-subject strand sounds as the 3rd degree in A major and the 1st degree in C sharp minor, and is the initial note of a subject entry in that key. These counter-subject entries both sound the relevant notes in C sharp minor and are also harmonized in that key. Here Bach again ties the subject's penultimate note into the following bar to again move as a suspension, here a 9/8 suspension resolving over C sharp minor's submediant harmony. The contour of the suspension's decorated resolution here also forms a second counter-subject entry, which uses the lowered 7th degree and omits the return to the original C sharp note. Here the second counter-subject entry is aligned with the first counter-subject entry, which initially begins by sounding the 3rd and 2nd degrees of C sharp minor, but concludes as the 4th and 3rd degrees in A major. The shift of the strands to sound in A major corresponds with this secondary 2-5 progression harmonized in C sharp minor. This altered second counter-subject entry uses again the lowered 7th degree and omits the return to the initial note. It outlines the relevant notes in C sharp minor, but is partially harmonized along with the second counter-subject entry in C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp minor. A D sharp minor subject entry begins here over the concluding notes of this second counter-subject entry. The first and second counter-subject entries in D sharp minor begin here, using their typical alignment with the subject entry. Despite these strands all beginning in D sharp minor and being harmonized in that key, their concluding notes sound in G sharp minor, the key in which the following counter-subject entries begin. These entries, however, also conclude in another key, this time C sharp minor, where once again Bach ties the lowered 7th degree of one key into the following bar for resolution over a chord in another key. As with this strand moving 5-4 sharp 3 and D sharp minor, this G sharp minor first counter-subject entry also has its 3rd degree raised to sound as the raised leading note of the new key. This second counter-subject entry outlines the 1st and lowered 7th degrees of G sharp minor, but is harmonized in C sharp minor. The subject and both counter-subject entries are here again harmonized in C sharp minor, but are configured differently. Bach here again ties the penultimate note of the subject's descent to here sound as a 7/6 suspension over C sharp minor's tonic and submediant chords. The key of C sharp minor continues through these bars, and here Bach uses the first countersubject entry sounding the relevant notes of that key. Beneath the first countersubject entry, however, a second countersubject entry outlines the 1st and 7th degrees of A major, here sounding as the 6th and 5th degrees in C sharp minor. Complete subject and countersubject entries sounding the relevant notes and harmonized in the key of C sharp minor are used here. The first countersubject's final note also sounds as the initial note of a first countersubject entry, here outlining the notes 5, 4, 3 in A major, but partially harmonized in F sharp minor, the key to which the work moves. These notes of the first countersubject entry therefore sound in F sharp minor, while this incomplete second countersubject entry also outlines the notes in A major, but is harmonized in F sharp minor, thereby sounding the 3rd and 2nd degrees in that key. A complete set of subject and countersubject entries in F sharp minor begin here, and once again Bach extends the penultimate note of the subject entry to here sound as a 9/8 suspension over tonic F sharp minor harmony. Here Bach begins a C sharp minor subject entry, which is accompanied by an incomplete second countersubject entry, also sounding the relevant notes of that key. This first countersubject entry, the final use of this countersubject in the fugue, outlines here instead of its usual 5/4-3 descent, a 3/2-1 descent in C sharp minor. This altered second countersubject entry, while outlining the 1st and lowered 7th degrees of G sharp minor, sound here as the 5th and 4th degrees in C sharp minor. And here another second countersubject entry outlining the 1st and lowered 7th degrees of D sharp minor is here harmonized in C sharp minor, sounding the 2nd and 1st degrees of that key. This E minor subject entry is predominantly harmonized in that key, however the work moves back into the key of C sharp minor, with the final notes of the subject's 3/2-1 descent sounding as the initial notes of a partial F sharp minor subject entry harmonized in the key of C sharp minor. Along with the E minor subject entry, Bach also introduces this incomplete B minor subject entry, the A sharp note of which sounds the 3rd of the secondary F sharp dominant 7th chord, moving to E minor's minor dominant. The B minor subject's D note sounds the 7th in E minor, and the C sharp sounds initially as the root note of a secondary C sharp dominant 7th chord in 4/2 inversion, and then the 5th of its chord of resolution, C sharp minor's subdominant. Using stretto, Bach introduces here beneath the E minor subject entry several incomplete second countersubject entries sounding the 4th and 3rd, 1st and lowered 7th, and the 5th and 4th degrees in that key. The final incomplete second countersubject entry, however, concludes in the key of C sharp minor, with its strand sounding the lowered 7th and 6th degrees in that key. This C sharp minor subject entry is also accompanied by several incomplete second countersubject entries in stretto, sounding the 4th and 3rd, 1st and raised 7th, and 2nd and 1st degrees of that key. Beneath this incomplete C sharp minor subject entry, Bach uses this incomplete second countersubject entry sounding the 6th and 5th degrees in that key, and here an incomplete second countersubject entry in F sharp minor is partially harmonized in that key. Another incomplete second countersubject entry here outlining the relevant notes and partially harmonized in F sharp minor concludes sounding the 4th and 3rd degrees in C sharp minor. A dominant pedal in C sharp minor begins here, and Bach uses a further incomplete second countersubject entry here outlining the relevant notes of G sharp minor but sounding the 5th and 4th degrees in C sharp minor. Here beneath an initial note of this complete C sharp minor subject entry, using alignment which is staggered, Bach simultaneously introduces 2 second countersubject entries, one outlining the relevant notes in A major and the other the notes in F sharp minor. Both the entries, however, are harmonized in C sharp minor, sounding therefore the 6th and 5th and 4th and 3rd degrees in that key. The dual second countersubject entries also move in stretto, with another incomplete second countersubject entry sounding C sharp minor's 1st and lowered 7th degrees. The final note values of the C-sharp minor subject entry are also altered to sound as the root note and 7th degrees of a secondary D-sharp dominant 7th chord in first inversion, moving to C-sharp minor's dominant. In these bars, Bach uses an incomplete F-sharp minor subject entry along with an incomplete second countersubject entry, also outlining the first and raised 7th degrees of that key, but here sounding the 4th and raised 3rd degrees of C-sharp minor. This final reference to C-sharp minor's subdominant key, F-sharp minor, perhaps explains Bach's inclusion of the altered subject entry during the fugue's exposition, where the expected answer entry on G-sharp is instead transformed into an F-sharp minor subject entry. The key of F-sharp minor is also included as brief tonicizations and secondary progressions at various times during the fugue's duration. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.